Voilà.
Welcome to our first panel in a series of 7 organized jointly by Africalia and le Forum Culturel, a collaboration that falls within the scope of the celebrations for the 25th anniversary of Africalia. In 2025, Africalia looks back on 25 years of cultural development, cooperation, and support to cultural and creative industries. Together with le Forum Culturel, Africalia also looks ahead and opens a discussion on ways to tackle contemporary challenges facing the cultural and creative industries. Today, we are very happy to discuss the subject of gender representations in arts and culture. I am so happy to welcome today Karima Grant from Senegal, founder and CEO of Imagination Africa and Care Imagination. Karima Grant calls herself a mompreneur, reimagining Africa's education system through creativity and innovation for the future. Karima Grant is a reference in the field of education and parenting in Senegal. Author of 5 children's books, and after more than 10 years working as an educator, Karima Grant founded Imagination Africa and its learning and innovation hub for children, Care Imagination. Hi, Karima. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Could you
having
share a
me.
bit about yeah, could you share a bit about your work and how you've engaged with the topic of gender in your artistic and cultural practice?
Yes, so I've been producing, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I've been producing content with and for children now for many years, and including not only writing, as you mentioned, children's book, but producing media, and then even founding a children's museum. And one of the things that I think has been central to the work that we have is making sure that all children find a representation of themselves. And that making sure that representations of themselves are coming not from pre-imagined sources and not from prefabricated understandings of how childhood should be or how little girls should be or how boys should be, but really allowing children to express who they are as individuals. So in the content that we produce, we've been really, like the name Imagination Africa is really giving children the possibilities to imagine themselves, giving them not only creative tools for them to express themselves, but also being able to empower the ecosystem around them to be able to understand how children can empower themselves. In the media content that we produce, it's been super, super, super important for us to make sure that children imagine themselves as powerful as they are, that they can see themselves in all fields, that we don't privilege one field over another. Right now, there's a great tendency for us to put down the arts and say science is so important, and I do believe science is important, but I believe arts are just as important as science, and making sure that we have, young children can see themselves as scientists, they can see themselves as explorers, as creatives. So making sure that they see those really beautiful images of themselves, exploring, discovering. Little boys can see themselves going through feelings, managing to express their emotions as well. Something that's very important is that we also show images of how parents of both genders hold space for both children's emotions, making sure that we can demonstrate how parents can also embrace and support positive representations of children. I think the last point that we'll bring up is the thing that's probably the most dangerous is all these toys and media that many children, particularly on the African continent, the more we advance, quote unquote, economically, the more we import ideas of childhood and the more we import ideas of what pretty is, the more we import ideas of what strong looks like, the more we import ideas of what cool looks like for our adolescents. And it's so, so important that we really combat that.
Thank you so much for this lovely introduction to your work, Karima. I'll move on to Nathalie Vairac. Nathalie Vairac is a French-born and Senegal-based actress and artistic director of Indian and Guadeloupean descent. With regular performances on international stages in both classical pieces and contemporary production, she has won several prestigious acting awards. Recently, she has developed artistic programs delving into the intergenerational and intercultural transmission of stories told by women. Thank you so much for joining us, Nathalie.
Thank you so much for having me.
I will start by asking you the same question. Could you share a bit about your work and how you've engaged with the topic of gender in your artistic practice?
Wow, I will say, and thank you for the introduction. First of all is respect. Since the beginning, as I'm a women actress, I think from the beginning, I just think always about respect, about equality. In the way of nowadays, I'm in a school of acting in Dakar, and I'm teaching every day. And one question was from the student yesterday was, what can I do? It was a woman, and what can I do when they ask me about sexuality in the movie or in the play? And for me, from the beginning, it was how I respect myself and not be, not corresponding to this image that the main, so I'm an actress for 30 years, so 30 years ago, was putting on me, not accepting that, just following my intuition, following the respect, following the respect in a way of acting, in the respect in my research, the respect in my body, the respect in everything was the thing that was most important for me.
Thank you so much, Nathalie. And last but not least, Harold George. Harold George is a Sierra Leonean choreographer and artistic director of Brussels-based Tunya Dance Theatre. His piece, Making Men, explores the effect of male stereotypes on men as they interact in society. Thank you for joining us, Harold. Harold.
Yes, I've unmuted myself. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Could you share a bit about your work and how you've engaged with the topic of gender in your artistic practice?
So, thanks for having me, considering, that it's the day to celebrate the rights of women. Give women a voice, and you're allowing a male voice into the fray. So thank you for having me in this space. Yes, gender. I have addressed it through a dance piece, and that dance piece has developed a life of its own. It's a life piece. It's a dance piece that also has a film, which went on to win quite a few awards. We don't really look at gender issues as related to women. We really look at gender as, well, the stereotypical masculinity and how it is something that, well, from the perspective of our work, is fabricated, and that is not something that is really natural, and that fabrication, which comes from society, etc., everyone knows, leads men often, not always, to what we are now calling toxic masculinity and violence, etc., and how then that affects our relationships with women and all of that. So basically, that's what that's the piece that I have done that's still touring. It's been for the last 4 years, and the film too is still going to various festivals. I thought I should mention that Africalia supported us in developing a process, and this process has allowed me to work in a number of schools around in Belgium and in other parts of the world. And through that process, which we believe is an Afrocentric process, we have been able to talk to so many young people, women, both girls and boys, about gender. And what always surprises me is the number of people, especially the boys, who say thank you for this opportunity to discuss this and to actually deal with it in a light-hearted manner, something that is so important to them, especially the adolescents. So yeah, that I think gives you an idea of the work I've been doing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting because you say you've been able to develop an Afrocentric approach to this question. How do you think your cultural context has influenced the way you approach gender representation in your work or in the way you approach your work?
Well, the process is not much to do, I think, with my so we created this process according to the person who really created it, who's a Sierra Leonean actor who lives and works in the UK. When he was at the Royal Shakespeare Company, he decided that he couldn't fully express himself if he didn't go back to the way we used to create when we all lived here in Sierra Leone. So they gave him money, and we came up with a process which we call hot housing, and that tries to input the way we don't write a piece, we create it in a collaborative manner, and we try to always discuss something that is of relevance to a society, and then we dance, we sing. I often will use Africa, but I allow people, depending on where I'm doing it, to also bring in their songs and their music and everything. And we try to give everyone a voice, through discussions, but also through improvisation. So in a sense, I'm back here in Sierra Leone actually for the first time, working with dancers for the first time in 40 years. And it's interesting because I see how they work, and I can see how some long forgotten part of myself used to work like that, with a great deal of freedom, literally, just, physical freedom and space. Although, just a little, I still think that the issue of gender, I think it's probably, I'm not sure things have improved. I'm just saying in dance, we have very few girls able to participate, contemporary dance in Africa. It's often a problem to get the girls in because they have expectations from their families, and they're married, or they fall pregnant after 2 weeks, and it's always a problem. And often tasks are not shared. The girls are expected to do the cleaning, and we have to constantly say that. And even now, 40 years on, I have to say that. And I don't recall it being like that back then. But anyway, so that gives you an idea of the process. It's a process that I've been working also with the University of Ghent. They also came here with me and established an MOU with the Frobe College University of Sierra Leone. And it's been shared with a number of universities as a sort of a different way of learning in this sort of decolonial perspective. The guy who does it, who initiated it, Patrice Naimbana, has a website, I think, called the Decolonial Lab. So you can always get more on that from his work.
Thank you so much, Harold. I want to ask the same question to Karima as well. How do you think your cultural or your national context has really influenced the way you approach gender in the work you produce?
I think Senegal is rather particular. I mean, I should probably contextualize this to say I've been living here. My mother's from Senegal. My father's from the Caribbean. I was born and raised a little bit all over, but mostly in the US. And so we've moved back here for 25 years. And I think Senegal is very particular. I think around the issues of gender, there's this back and forth. I mean, Natalie can probably also speak to this, but we have this wonderful understanding of power of women and the power of very, very matriarchal women. We just celebrated yesterday one of the famous emblematic, iconic women who were anti-colonial fighters. But then at the same time, a lot of what George raised about what daily expectations are for girls, how girls are expected to manage both domestic duties, societal expectations, can also limit the vocabulary that we give them for them to express themselves. And I would absolutely agree with George is that the flip side of that is that it also limits how men, and particularly young boys, are able to express themselves. And so, whereas I feel like there's a lot of real pillars, real opportunities, I think, in Senegalese culture to really build. And actually, I think there's a brilliant generation of young women who are doing that, and really some excellent work by Senegalese feminists to really explore and unpack and really rename things more appropriately. It's still a challenge. It's still complex. And it's still, I think, one of the ways that colonialism is still coded. It's still coded through gender and the expectations of how we should be. And I think it also codes what success looks like for young women and for young men. If you're successful, if dot 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 dot, as gender defines it.
It's interesting. Do you think, Nathalie, can you relate to what Karima is sharing, being also Senegal-based?
Yeah, I'm not working a lot in Senegal, but yes, I think there is a lot of what I can say as a Caribbean and Indian. When we grow up as a black little girl, or as a black wherever we come from, we saw our mother suffering a lot on the question of gender. Well, it was my point of view of, and I can see from the new generation that it's not easy to find a balance between I want to be who I am, I want to listen to me, and in the same time, the culture is so strong, the tradition is so strong that as a black little girl, we are educated with what we are supposed to do and what we are not supposed to do, and we don't have the same freedom like the boys. And the boys didn't have the permission to express deeply the emotion that they went through. And this will affect a lot the relationship between women and men. When I'm working with a group or with men or on the performance that I'm creating, I try to express that we can allow ourselves to express the emotion, because for me emotion is a way of moving on. If we don't express, if we keep it, I don't think that something will change or something will be possible, because at the end, when we express the emotion and when a man will allow himself to cry, like for example in the last workshop that I did, I can see that it's a Pan-African group, and we can see that some people come from Burkina Faso, from Chad, from Cameroon, Benin, and the men, they always told me that I'm not supposed to cry, I'm not supposed to. Where they learn that, and with this relationship, we can see that the women are scared. And for me, even for me, when I decided to become an actress, it was not easy in my family or in my culture or in my tradition, because the image that the family can have at this time connected to an artistic journey was for women something bad. And by the time you get married, by the time you become a mom, at the beginning, when we have 20 years old, we are so many, but by the time we become a mom, and all the family will give you a pressure to stop it. And in Senegal, there is a lot of young actors or young performer, and when they when they get married, they have to stop. There's not a lot of men will accept that the women will go in tour or that the women will go in stage in our culture. And I can see that in Senegal, and you can see as well that women, for me, I think it's important to talk that the relationship between women is not easy at all, and especially in Senegal, I found it, because there is I think is connected to the colonialism, because the colon make us believe that there is only one place. If you don't want to be in the plantation and you want to work in the house of the colon people, you will have one woman who can achieve to go there and not suffering on the plantation. And this create something that we trust that there is only one place, and is creating a lot of conflict, a lot of sometimes we can feel jealousy, we can feel a way of comparing between the people. And I think we have a lot of work to be in peace together and to be free from what the others put on our brain, on the memory of the body, what we have in the body as a memory, about the relationship that we can have with men and with women as well. And this, what I like in Karima deeply, is that she tried to do that from the beginning. It means the childhood. That is so important to start with little boys and little girls, to change the relationship that we have with ourselves, but with the others in a group, accepting the difference, and in the same time make the difference a process of unity.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's very interesting how you're talking about this pressure that comes, that starts in the household, in the families. What are some of the other biggest challenges you faced in addressing gender stereotypes through your work? Challenge, be it getting to have crowds coming or getting funding for this type of project. What are those challenges? Nathalie, still.
Personally, I'm a lucky girl, so I didn't find any issue myself. That's why I try to creating. By the time I was an actress in France, I was based in France. For me, it was so important to realize that I was so lucky to find funds, to find support. So I always try to work with women in jail, to women from different kind of issue. Women was so I used theater, and by the time I used to live in Kenya, I did it the same in Kibera. It was so important because myself I didn't find issue to find fund. I will fight, I will go in front of an institution, and I will sleep in front of the door. So I will have the font. No, I will not. You can't tell me no. It's impossible. This was in my mind since I'm 20 years old. Because it's not about myself. It's about that I will take the money to do something for the others. And I will. So I'm very strong for that. And but by the time I will give some workshop in different places of the world, last year I was in Congo, I can see that there is a lot of issue, and especially for women. The little girl who want to be an actress, they have to hide themselves from the parents. When I did it in Kenya, they didn't eat and they want to come for acting. So yes, I will find many issue on my road, but never myself to find fund for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Nathalie. Karima, have you faced any challenges addressing gender stereotypes through your work?
I think, what's strange is that I think, like Nathalie, once you are who you are and your values and who you are, it kind of steers you toward people who are going to support you, or it's going to steer you. I can't say there have been many open confrontations. However, what I have noticed is where the inner limitations of many people who I work with are. And so that when you're about to create something, and it can be something as silly as like, okay, we're working on an animated series for children, and just the depiction of the father being able to, he's cleaning the house, and the children come in and do something, and just something as silly as that will be a point where your collaborators will stop because they don't know, it's not an image that they know. How do they define it? Really also, just quite technically, being able to say this is how a father, and we know these things exist. We know that this happens. But it's that we've chosen to not give examples of these and let these things populate our imagination, so that it's the first thing we know of. So instead, you find yourself, giving technical no. Actually, he should be holding the broom. He should be sweeping. The children should be coming in. This is how he gathers them up in his arms. I mean, just little things that you realize it's just a lack of imagination. It's really not places where we've given ourselves and our children enough to work with to see the world differently. And I think that that's probably the biggest challenge, is that the minute that we're not strong enough, because we don't have enough of a vocabulary, we don't have enough of images, we don't have enough representation, that's really where we've begun already with limiting how we can see the world, and then most importantly, how we can be. I was very lucky that when I was young, my mother did over and beyond to give me just a breadth of images and a breadth of experiences that allowed me to understand how you could be in the world without conforming to the stereotypes. But again, I mean, we've all mentioned about colonization. The more we advance, I think also too, particularly in Africa, the more we quote unquote approach development, the more we embrace these ideas that say, that are equally as limiting, and the more that we are unable to look at our past and really say from our past, okay, where were the pillars? Where were the strengths? Where were those different gender stereotypes, So I think that those are some of the limitations, is really the lenses that we choose to see things through.
Harold, I feel like this is really resonating with what you were also sharing regarding going back to our ways of working. Is this a challenge that you feel you face, this limitation of imagination, this limitation of knowing our own culture?
Okay, I think that's a loaded set of questions, because what is our culture? If we're not willing to have a clear and open discussion about that. And if it's not up for debate, and I find, certainly here in Sierra Leone, that it's often not up to debate, that area. I was recently at the Forum Culturel University of Sierra Leone, and the students chose, we always choose a theme for the workshops. And one of the girls chose to talk about gender. And of course, there were 4 women and 20 men. And they took over. And they said, and they literally silenced her by saying, "Oh, she must be a feminist." And she said nothing more. What resonates the most with me is this idea of imagination. I think Karima was referring to. Reminds me of, you know, the book by Aminata Traoré, Le viol de l'imaginaire. I think that is the problem. If there is something that is colonially problematic, it's that we seem to be looking elsewhere for solutions instead of questioning ourselves, talking amongst ourselves. How do we have that open discussion, open debate? Funding, obviously, I live in Belgium. Funding is hard because my work is very Afrocentric, and I don't adhere strictly to the codes of contemporary dance. And so there's a certain level of misunderstanding. But I would have had that misunderstanding here in West Africa in other regards. So I'm not too worried about that. I think that maybe it's like I worked with Dobe Niaore. I don't know if you know the Ivorian singer. And we did a piece, because I was doing the piece on men, called Femme tout simplement, which was just her talking about what the other panelists are referring to, talking about the need for strength. That's what she wanted to share. And that's why she brought together women. She said, you have to be strong. You have to be persistent. It's not, that is not tantamount to rejecting your femininity or your femaleness. And she was trying to say that through dance and I think it's always a very effective way. And just to conclude, I'd say that in Making Men, what we were addressing was exactly what I think it's Nathalie was saying about the limitations that stereotypes place on us, and that within this so-called power that men glean from these limitations, that are put on women, they're also very limited in their ability to express their emotions, in their ability to be themselves. And I don't think people are aware. I mean, we always say society, but we forget that we're doing it ourselves. All of us want to be that perfect man. The problem is that that perfect ideal, stereotypical macho man who's kind but male, stoical but also thoughtful, all of that. And most of us want to be that perfect woman as well, and whatever society has declared that perfect woman is in a given space. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is imposing that on everyone else. Most of us are never going to be that. Why should we be forced? Why can't there be space for more? And the space for discussion, I believe, really is augmented, magnified through art, which is why I do what I do. So it's the opportunity to be there with the students. We laughed and we talked, but you could see many of the guys had never been challenged, because the girls who seemed quite happy and free were not willing to have that discussion with them, because they didn't obviously feel any opening, and the guys felt challenged. And I kept saying to them, why are you challenged by the notion of a woman deciding for herself? And they said, no, men must help women because they need us. I said, well, I didn't hear the girl say she didn't need you. I didn't hear that. I heard her say, we need choice in such and such an area. So how does that threaten you? And no, everyone said, in the Bible. I said, but, this is, we're all academics here. Give me another source. Give me something contemporary. Tell me why you feel threatened. It was very, very interesting, but I will never convince them. Making Men doesn't suggest that there is a response. I like last little story, when I had this girl we were talking to young girls and young boys who were all 15 to about 18. And they were saying, yeah, I don't understand why guys can't cry. We want men to be more free. And then one of them says, yeah, but being the kind of woman I am, I would rather my husband doesn't cry, and I'd rather he was strong and had a good job. But of course, I really feel for those men who struggle. Can you imagine the faces of the young guys who had been daring to say what they really felt? And he wasn't consciously, she was trying to show support.
Absolutely.
So within ourselves, we police ourselves. We men police each other, and the wider society polices us too. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying what I had to say.
But can you share a bit how have audiences and communities responded to your work, to Making Men?
So Making Men is a very successful piece. You know, the film has won, I don't know, 28 prizes, and it's still going to film festivals 4 or 5 years later. The people come up to me crying, and I don't really understand it, because it was a discussion, and we had that discussion become art through the hot housing. But people get very emotional, and especially in Belgium, a lot of young men came up to me and said, "This is so good, thank you." And I kept saying, "Please tell me why. I just want to understand." And they said, "Well, I felt that this could help free me." Free you from what? No, it's just a feeling I have. It's really interesting, because people, I don't know that they're able to put words on it. And I think maybe that's what art offers, that they don't really have the words. They just know that what those guys are going through, they on stage, we just take them through various stages in the life of a man, you know, the becoming and the time you're supposedly there. And it's not about what you're thinking, it's about what you're feeling. And I think that people resonate with. So we joke amongst ourselves that we've only had one show where we didn't have a standing ovation. And people, they just stamped. It was in Germany. People stamped on the floor, and the dancers had to come back 4 or 5 times. And maybe it's their youthful enthusiasm, but they keep saying to me, this is a learning process. We've learned so much. Yet one of them, I know this is a sad bit of a story, committed suicide about a year and a half ago. One of the original members who plays a really interesting part in the film as well. And who had always been the one saying, this is really helping me as a man. But then at the end, he commits suicide because he's unable with his girlfriend. I think he was trying to threaten her. All the issues of it. And then we had a long discussion with all the other dancers afterwards, and they kept saying, you know, why didn't he talk to us? And I said, well, this is what we've been working on, you know. This is when we did the little sequence where the two men can't really speak to each other, and they said, that looks so gay. When they watched it on screen, they said, oh, it looks so gay. People will, you know, they already say that about us as dancers. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Nathalie, how do you feel people have reacted to the work you've been doing about transmission, about the role of women? What type of reaction have you been receiving from audiences?
A lot of tears, a lot of emotion, a lot of crying. People was, the question was for me at the beginning, because my mom decided to get married with a black man that in India 40 years ago, it was, I don't know how she make it. And to hide themselves, they went in a small village in south of France, close to Bordeaux, but it was a small village. And from the beginning, I was the only black. Up to 16 years old, I was the only black in school. And for so many reasons, I didn't understand why they decided that, because it was painful for me to be the only black in the 70s. And so when I started my journey as an actress, I realized that I was not the only one like this. Even if it's not in France, it can be in another part of the world. And And you can see that my parents decided to make me grow up in a way of assimilation. You see, my name is Nathalie, and Vairac is the name of the colon that they give to the slaver. And so on my journey, I did a lot of research about my family background in India and in West Indies, Guadeloupe. And I realized that the generation of my parents was not able to talk about that, to explain me. They just escaped themselves, and they hide themselves in a small village. And as a little girl, when I started to work in Paris, and I always used to give workshop because I found that I receive a lot, like I said before. So it's very important to share. And when I was in the subway of Paris or whatever, I always find that there is a cut between the generation of the parents and what's happening in the school when we have the parents coming from different parts of the world, and we are growing up in another part, and especially in Europe. And for me, I always, even now, sometimes you can see that the parents will not explain. Like it looks like it will be painful to share where they're coming from deeply, not just originally, but when I went with my father for this show, I went with my father in West India. I passed so many times with him, and I realized that everything that I couldn't explain, I found my father very strict. As a teenager, I have so many reproaches. And when I make this research with him, I realized that as a little boy, he was suffering a lot. And because my grandfather was hard. And I realized that I can understand why, because why this little boy become this man, and why this little woman in India, the little girl become this woman. And when they met each other, they even don't share what was the background of suffering for each other. A little bit, but not too much. And of course, is in my body, is in my conscience, and is more than that, is in my inconscience. And on my way to be an actress, maybe I'm strong because I didn't want to suffer. I didn't want to, I have the instinct to protect myself. But yes, today I can speak consciously about that. But when I was 20 or 30, maybe I was trying to escape to the memories of my family background and the ancestors. So, and there is so many things as well, because I was an actress in France, so I was playing Shakespeare and Racine and Corneille and blah blah, and I always find my difficulty was not with the fact that about gender, that I am a woman. It was the fact that my imagination was with different color, different way of connecting with the invisible, because the background in India is the spirituality in India is completely different, and the way the spirituality in West Indies is another way of. And I have everything on me, but as an actress in Paris, I was supposed to perform like the other actors, and put everything in aside and become this European actress. And I was suffering. It was so painful because, okay, I do my best to do it. My job was working a lot. I was employed, no issue in this size. But when I come back to my home, it was like a deep disconnection in my mind, who I am. Then at the beginning it's more than 50 years that I'm based in Africa, beginning East and now Senegal. I decided, okay, now I will never be this actress, European actress anymore. And I will work about transmission. I will do everything about transmission. I will just work connecting to my spirituality, to my way of feeling the invisible. I will just be who I am. And on the way to share some workshop with the young women and men who want to become actors, I can see, in my job acting, the goal in Africa is to go to Hollywood. Why you have this goal? Why you have to think that where you're coming from is not good enough? Why we have this idea about ourselves? And we always in a movement of escaping, but the place where we are, where we grow up, and think that Hollywood is the best, or reaching Europe is the best, become an actor in Paris is the best. And there is a school in Senegal opened by Adama Diop, who is a beautiful actor in Paris from Senegal. And we have always this discussion, because he said, you grow up in France and you starting to become an actress in Paris, so now you don't care about Paris anymore and you work in Africa most of the time. And he opened a school, and you can see that, I'm very close to Germaine Acogny, and she opened a school in Senegal, and people from all over the world will come to Germaine Acogny École des Sables to learn, the dance with her. Why we don't sing the femme about acting? Why acting it's only in the ritual, in the place of Hollywood or Europe, and all the ritual that we can find in Africa when you go to Benin, when you are here with the dub in Senegal, or this is already acting, and everybody is connecting to that. So yes, the show was Mutika Patado that I did for the biennale, the last biennale, was about that. Was about allowing myself to say the truth, because it's 30 years that I have characters. So I'm Desdemona, then I'm Andromaque, then in a movie of Apolline Traoré, I will be Aïssatou, and in another movie I will be. So I wanted to say, no, Nathalie is only that. And the beauty of this is that I received so many testimony about people realize and that they always sometimes lie to themselves. And it was really beautiful. The day of the performance was a lot of person crying a lot. I think that this is the time to say the truth in a way of emotion, who we are, the truth as a human. This is who I am. I'm not somebody else. I'm Nathalie with the pain of this, with the difficulty of this, with my tears, with my emotion. And this is what I have to share. And this, I realize that when I say my truth, the others in front of me can say their truth. And for that, I'm grateful.
Thank you so much for your answer, Nathalie. I think it's very interesting how you point out the importance of those narratives that we hear as children. And I wanted to know, Karima, how do parents react to the work that you propose, and how do kids react to it?
Yeah, if I'm happy to answer that, but if I just thought of something that Nathalie mentioned, that I think we've we're all echoing that I think we're not naming, that I think is so important to name before we go into that, because I think it links to how parents react, is, there's a real violence that keeps this order in place, that pushes people back, whether it's a mental violence, I think, whether it's even a visual violence of being the only Black person in a space that's all white, whether it's an intellectual violence of operating in a space that's, that's not allowing the difference of different ideas. And very often for young boys and for women, it's a physical violence. Of really somebody, there's so many times you can talk to women and they can talk about, the fact that a man will raise his voice, even a taxi guy will raise his voice because they'll be offended at, the position you've taken or their assumptions about how you're behaving. And I think if we don't mention and name that violence, it's almost like we're saying that, a lot of this happens and, it's society, but there's some real forces, physical forces that hurt the body, that hurt the mind, that hurt our imaginations, that keep us in these spaces, that keep, these gender representations the way that they are. So I just wanted to mention that. I think one of the challenges also too that's linked to violence in parenting is that, that's sort of, because violence can very often be that space, that borderline, that's keeping you in this very rigidly defined space. Very often that's what we inherit. And so that's what we do with our children. We'll use violence to keep our children in line. And it may not always be physical violence. Sometimes it's incredible emotional violence. Sometimes it's verbal violence. Sometimes it's just, not recognizing when children are trying to express themselves. So I find in a lot of the work that we have done, parents have been surprised by how much their children can express and will express. Parents have been, I think, even overwhelmed, and if I can be really quite honest, made insecure by that assumption of space, because the spaces with which we're working with children are nonviolent spaces, are spaces where, we are trying to help children use something other than violence to express, some of the pain that they're feeling. And I find that, so many of the images that we give children are very violent images, finally. My children all complain, 3 of them are big. I still have one that's at home, but they used to complain because when I was little, when they were little, I was so very vigilant about what they saw and what they would consume. And I think but for me, it was very, very violent to have my children watch a show and there'd be only one Black character, to watch a show and, Natalie talked about Hollywood, but, whenever we talked about Africa, it was always in these very limited terms about poverty or about, children are hungry. I mean, those things are so violent, and the impact they've had on us and how we imagine ourselves. It's really hard to undo. It's really, really very hard to undo. So again, I think to answer your question, I think, grappling with freedom and how complex freedom is and what it's going to take for us to get free is something that a lot of parents are grappling with, because that makes them, of course, think about themselves and, and again, it's not because there's a formula. It's not because I'm saying, you have to do this. You should raise boys like this. You should raise girls like this. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think it is for every parent to really think very clearly about, what freedom is going to look like in their homes. How are your children going to be able to express themselves? And then really choose what we feed our children visually, verbally, much more conscientiously. So I think that's what I feel is really that thinking. There's so much thinking that I think that parents greet the work that we're doing, and not only parents but teachers. We work tremendously with educators, and educators are always, sadly enough, most educational systems, they encourage educators to do anything but think. It's like it's almost the impossible of it. But very often when they come into contact with our content or anything we're producing, all of a sudden they've got questions, and the questions are hard for them to grapple with.
Yeah, thank you. I think what you sharing is resonating with our public, because I can see one comment here saying young women don't have models. We need to hear more success stories. Does anyone want to react to this statement?
Yeah, I'll take it. I think there are models, but I think, one of the challenges is the paradigms we see the world through, right? So we see the world and it's like there's so many models around us. It's just that those models don't correspond with what we think a model should look like, right? So that, we have people in our own communities that are doing amazing, glorious work, but because they're not necessarily making this XYZ amount of money, they're not models. So when we talk about models, we really have to unpack. What do we mean when we say models? What do we want? We want to see somebody like Issa Rae, who's from the Senegalese diaspora, who's crushing in Hollywood? Or do we want to go and look at how many women have been working? I mean, most African countries have very long histories of drama, and many actresses who have been there. Are we going and telling their stories? Those of us who are in media, like, do we go and talk to these people to learn the lessons, to take the stories, to archive their histories? So again, I think the success stories are there. I think we just have to unpack those words that have given to us, like success, because they're loaded. They're loaded words that come from a very small imagination that very often isn't pointed in our direction. It's pointed outward and pointed away from ourselves.
I think really relating to this, the next comment is also very interesting because Uriel is asking us, why do we keep on thinking that the best comes from elsewhere and that success must come necessarily from the West? How can we break this pattern and rethink the legacy that has been passed down to us? I think, Nathalie, you were also talking about this. You want to react?
Yes, I think, it's a traumatized that we receive and that our community receive that, it's coming from so far that we think that even for the prize, we think that if you earn a prize in Europe, this will give you value. If you earn a prize in US, this will give you value. So we value ourselves, and we're still doing that, unfortunately, that from, if you succeed as a writer, if you succeed with a prize in Paris, then you become famous, and then your community and the country where you're coming from will give you credit. But and this go with the models that Karima was talking about. We need, and step by step, to realize that we have so many models, and we need to value ourselves, to clean. We need to clean the imagination, and this process of needed, because we are the one today who give the value to the West. This is whatever the West is doing today. We are the one, I'm the one who give you the power to value me. You are not the one who give. We on the past, we trust our parents, our grandparents trust. Okay, people from the West are the one who can say, okay, now you're good. But today, I'm the one to give you the power. And we know that. And we are aware about that, what they make us believe this completely wrong. There's no validity in that. And but we still thinking that to succeed, you need to be, we can see in Africa, the people, by the time that they got a lot of money, there is a lot, even if it's on the way to change, they will need to wear a suit or to have the things. I can see in Senegal, we have so many designers, So when a designer is doing a bag in Senegal and he put a price on it, it's expensive. But if you go to France and you buy a Chanel, this is not expensive. And you are so happy to show to the community that you have a Chanel bag, This shows us how mad we are. And we are the people who are mad, because why we want, we have so many tailor in different, wherever in Africa, we have so many tailors, so many talented people. Why we will not wear that? Why we will not support that? Why we will not put our money to support the community and be happy when we succeed and we can achieve something from outside? And this is for me so important to one, like Eustache say, we need to question ourselves. We need to question a lot. I think a gathering like that, it's so important, because, and we need to say the truth. To say, I'm a person who is so happy and so proud when I have a bag with the tailor in the corner in the street. Or I will think that now I succeed because I can pay a Chanel. Why I give so much importance on the Chanel bag, and realize that if I'm the kind of person who say, okay, the Chanel bag make me feel that now I achieve something, or the price in Europe give me that I'm very proud of myself because I succeed in there. We need to question why we're still giving the power to the others to value who we are. Why we need we still need the value from the West. If I do a movie or a play with somebody from different country in Africa, did I'm proud of myself? Or I will be proud of myself if I have a character in a Hollywood movie. I will, and I think is the question that we need to ask to personally and collectively.
Thank you, Nathalie. I see we are slowly reaching the end of our panel, but before we say our goodbyes, I wanted to ask you to, looking to the future, looking to the next 5-10 years, what can artists, cultural organizations, and policymakers do to foster more inclusive and diverse narratives around gender? Maybe starting with Harold.
What can they do? Well, I think what they can do is obvious to most people, isn't it? That they should. What is it they say internationally now? You gender mainstreaming and all that sort of thing. Make it something that's important. But I think whether we're getting support for it or not, there are a lot of people doing this work. I'm not alone. Nathalie, Karima, we're not alone. And perhaps opportunities like this will help. We can talk to each other. We can create networks. We can promote the whole idea of being aware. What I would say is that you cannot, I don't believe that you can blame people for the perceptions they have. All our perceptions are a result of our lives and our realities. People always talk about the truth and reality, and I won't go as far as, the Trumpian idea that, the alternative truth. I don't think that's true. I think there is objective truth, but the way we perceive life is physical. It's, it's emotionally physical. It's within one body, within one society, and you can't just waltz in and say to someone, feel, they think they're feeling anyway, just like you can't tell a woman who's with an abusive husband, leave, get up and go. You're not really taking account of who she is, of what she's been through. And the same thing is true of people who aspire to do everything European and Western. Maybe if I say to the students I'm teaching that maybe we failed them, and that as my generation, the older generation, and that we haven't shown them the value. I mean, I was born, bred in Sierra Leone, and yet I've been able to be successful elsewhere. And I don't feel ashamed. It's always interesting for me when my children talk about their color, because they grew up in the West. And it's interesting because it's not an experience I have. I don't feel like the only Black man in the room, even when I am, because I wasn't brought up to think of that as an issue. I simply go ahead and do what I'm aiming to do. And if I don't fail, I never think it's to do with my color. I mean, it may be, but I know because I worked here, there were so many things that held me back here as well in Africa. So why, it's just another factor. So ultimately, how do you change minds? You have to just keep doing it. It's over time. Culture changes gradually, and we should get out of this fight that everything has become between the left and the right, etc., and have these spaces through the work from education, etc., working with young kids. Over time, it will bear fruit. I do believe that it will bear fruit. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Harold. I want to ask the same question to you, Karima. What can artists, cultural organizations, and policymakers do to foster more inclusive and diverse narratives around gender?
So thank you, Harold, because I thought your answer was so very thoughtful. It made me think, so I'm glad you repeated the question, because I was really lost and really thinking about what you were saying. One, I think I absolutely agree with Harold, is I think, culture is something that changes over time. And I actually think it is changing. When you look at a lot of the young people, and granted, many of the places we're looking are on social media where we're seeing some of this thought, but there are ideas that are changing. As much as we can talk about what's not changing, there's a wonderful energy of thought that's coming from young people that are questioning all of us. And I think one of the things we have to do is let ourselves be questioned. And even if the questioning gets harsh, because I think that's probably the challenge between generations, is sometimes the questioning has been very harsh and we've run from the questions, we've shut down the questions. But I think those of us who are cultural workers, it's so important for us to be able to be questioned, to hold the questions very lovingly, to hear what's behind the questions and to engage them, to take the young people very, very seriously in their questioning, even if we don't agree with the answers. I think, again, one of the things I really heard in what Harold was saying is that there's not one answer either. There's certainly directions that we can be facing. And so maybe that's, what we want to support our young people is to point to better directions and not just point, to the West or to the East. I mean, I think also one of the things that's happening is that we're becoming more and more mixed up. It's not just about those of us who were raised here, those of us who were raised there. I mean, we know there's just all kinds of intersections of people moving back and forth as well. I also think, to be quite honest, there's something for our countries to do. Like, I'm not going to get them off the hook. There's something for funders also to begin to ask our countries to do. You know, I look at this big USAID craziness and, you know, everybody's upset, but USAID had so much influence. What cultural organization has that same influence that can really influence how our countries build cultural systems? Because that's the thing, is that if we want to produce something else culturally, we have to have systems in place. Systems help, you know, systems are built on values, right? They help institutionalize values. So, you know, how are we thinking on that line? You know, what systems are in place? What systems need to be rehabilitated? What systems can we put in place? I think what's so very exciting is there's so many cultural workers who've had the experience of working both on the continent and in Europe, or in Europe and coming back to the continent, that are building institutions and systems. And I think there needs to be funding for that. Funding in the sense of, okay, this is not just a project. How do we make this an institution? How do we make this something there? So also thinking about funding differently, not funding, you know, just for a project, but really making sure that we're connecting projects to all the other inputs that help it become institutionalized as well. Because if we really want to bring, you know, if we really want gender not to be of an issue, then we really have to institutionalize the questioning of gender. You know, we really have to institutionalize us being able to create other possibilities of gender and not just, you know, relying on what is already.
Thank you, Karima. And I will leave Nathalie to do the same exercise, trying to, unfortunately, concisely, because we only have 2 minutes left, share with us what you believe, what steps can artists, cultural organization, and policymakers take to foster more inclusive narratives around gender.
Well, you know, as I'm mixed, what I will say, that there is, what they have already said, there is not only one answer. Each person will have the, you know, we have the own experience, and with this experience of life, we are a way of looking about this situation. And I think if we listen to each other, we will find a way to build something new. Because you know, I always think, how the world will be when my kids will get 20 or 25, and I don't know. I have no answer. So I think it's step by step, listening to, because that, of course, is not just West and West, it's not just Asian and Africa, it's not just US and Africa. It's more complex than that. It's more deep. And I think we need to listen to build some place like imagination when it was done, build some school where we can find what this new generation need, and it will be different. Even in the same country like Senegal, if you go to Casamance, it will be different if you listen to them than the Serer, than here in Dakar. So I will just talk about listening each other.
Thank you so much, Nathalie. Thank you so much to our incredible panelists for such a rich and thought-provoking discussion. We've heard powerful stories about how art and culture can challenge traditional gender narratives, break stereotypes, and create space for diverse voices. Your work has truly been inspiring. It's been a privilege to hear your perspective today. I also want to thank everyone who's joined us online for your questions and your comments. See you at the next panel next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.